Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be jumping into something pretty fascinating. We're going all the way back to September 2001.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Back when, flip phones were like the coolest thing and the internet was, well, let's just say it was a different world.
Yeah, I remember those days.
We're going to be looking at facial recognition technology.
Okay.
Back in its very early stages. And for this, we're diving into this really interesting article called When Nobody's Looking.
Yeah.
The Proliferation of Visual Biometrics by William L. Weaver.
I see.
Now, you might be thinking,
Right.
2001, that's like ancient history, right?
Right.
Especially in the tech world.
For sure.
But trust me on this. Seeing where this technology started really helps us understand how far we've come
Okay.
and, even more importantly, where we might be going in the future.
Interesting. It's like looking back at the first Model T to understand how we got to self-driving cars.
Exactly. It's all about perspective.
Yeah.
And getting those insights from, looking back at the past.
Right.
Okay, so the article starts off
Yeah.
with this really thought-provoking analogy. It talks about how, character is what you do when nobody's watching. And then it jumps into this emerging field of visual biometrics.
Okay.
So what does that even mean? I mean, I've heard of biometrics like using your fingerprint
Right.
to unlock your phone.
Yeah.
What makes it visual?
That's a great question. So biometrics is basically using your unique biological traits to identify you.
Right.
Fingerprints are the classic example, like you said.
Yeah.
But it could also be things like your iris patterns or even your voice.
Interesting.
Now, when we say visual biometrics, we're talking about zeroing in on your facial features,
Okay.
using them to create a unique identifier.
So kind of like a digital fingerprint of your face?
Precisely. Instead of swirls and ridges, it's all about the shape of your nose,
Okay.
the distance between your eyes, all those unique characteristics that make your face yours.
Gotcha. So it's not just about recognizing a face. It's about actually identifying a specific person.
Exactly. The article highlights how we've always been surrounded by images, even back then.
Yeah.
Think about tabloid photos, FBI most wanted posters,
Right.
even milk cartons with missing children.
It's true. We've been using pictures to identify people for ages.
Right. But back then, nobody really imagined that a computer could do it with the kind of speed and accuracy that we see today.
And that's where FACEIT comes in.
Okay.
This system developed by Visionix Corporation was really revolutionary for the time.
Yeah.
Just imagine a system that could take a digital picture, even a grainy, low-resolution one,
Okay.
and turn it into a unique face print.
A face print. Now, that sounds interesting. How did that even work back then?
Well, think of it like creating a connect-the-dots picture.
Hmm.
But instead of dots, it uses key features and measurements of your face.
Okay.
So FACEIT would analyze an image and then create this face print using something called local feature analysis, or LFA.
The LFA, huh?
Yeah.
Sounds complicated.
The technical stuff can get a bit complex.
Right.
But the important thing is this LFA could create a unique identifier.
Yeah.
Even from a limited amount of visual information.
So even if the picture was taken in bad lighting, or if someone was wearing glasses or making a funny face, it could still identify them.
Exactly. That's what's remarkable about LFA.
Wow.
It's like recognizing a friend, even if they've changed their hairstyle or they're wearing a hat, you still know it's them.
Right.
Just based on those underlying features.
It's pretty incredible how our brains can do that.
It is. But I bet back then it took forever for computers to process all that.
Yeah, you'd think so, right? I mean, computers were pretty slow back then.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, FACEIT could compare a face print against a massive database at an incredible speed.
Right.
According to the article, it could sift through 15 million face prints per minute.
15 million per minute back in 2001.
Yep. It really makes you appreciate how far computing power has come.
It really does. So with that kind of speed, how accurate was this early facial recognition? Could it reliably pick someone out of a crowd?
Well, they tested it using the FER database, which is basically a collection of facial images specifically for testing this kind of technology.
I gotcha.
And get this, the error rate was less than 1%.
Wow. Even by today's standards, that's really accurate.
It is.
So with accuracy like that, they must have started using it right away.
Oh, yeah. They were definitely eager to put this groundbreaking technology to use.
So where was it being used back in 2001?
One example that stands out from the article is Ybor City.
Okay.
It's an entertainment district in Tampa, Florida. They actually installed 36 cameras, all linked to the FACEIT system.
Hold on. So they were using it for live surveillance, like scanning everyone walking by.
Yeah, that's real.
That seems like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. Did people even back then think this technology would become so common?
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is. Were they worried about privacy back then, too?
You're hitting on some really important points there.
Yeah.
And those early concerns about privacy, well, those really laid the groundwork for the debates we're having today.
I bet.
It's a topic that deserves a deeper look.
It does. We should definitely dive into that more after the break.
It's really fascinating to see how those early worries about privacy have kind of evolved along with the technology itself.
Yeah, for sure.
Back in 2001, when that article was written, people were already making comparisons to Big Brother and, worrying about it being misused.
Yeah, even back then, the thought of cameras everywhere watching you was kind of creepy.
It was.
It's interesting that people were already talking about these issues.
Right.
So what did they do about those concerns back then?
Well, one idea was this no match, no memory policy.
Okay, what's that?
So basically, if a face print the system captured didn't match anyone in the database, it would be automatically deleted.
Okay, so if they weren't looking for you specifically, they wouldn't keep your info.
Exactly. It was a way to, limit how much data they collected.
That makes sense.
And to prevent misuse.
But I imagine even then there were debates about, how long to keep the data if there was a match.
Oh, absolutely. And that debate is still going on today.
Yeah, it makes you think, how long should they keep it?
Right.
And who gets to see it?
Exactly.
Not easy questions to answer.
Nope, not at all.
It seems like that no match, no memory idea was a good start.
Yeah?
But technology has come a long way since those 36 cameras in Ybor City.
It really has.
Compared to what we have today, it seems almost quaint.
It does. Think about it. We've got facial recognition in security systems,
Right.
financial transactions, even social media.
It's everywhere.
It's become so common that we barely even notice it anymore.
And those databases have gotten huge. We're talking billions of images now, right?
Absolutely. Billions and billions. And the algorithms are so much more advanced.
So they're not just faster,
No.
they're smarter too.
Much smarter. They can handle different poses, lighting, even bad image quality.
Things that would have confused those older systems.
Totally.
But doesn't that make the privacy concerns even bigger?
It definitely raises the stakes. The more powerful the technology gets, the more important it is to have, clear rules and ethical guidelines.
For sure. Speaking of ethics, I've always wondered about bias in these systems.
Right.
I mean, they're trained on tons of images.
Huge data sets. Yeah.
What if those data sets aren't really diverse enough?
That's a really important point. You see, if the data used to train the algorithm is skewed towards certain types of faces, it can lead to errors and even discrimination.
So like a system trained mostly on pictures of men?
Yeah.
Might not be as good at identifying women?
Exactly. And that can have serious consequences, especially in things like law enforcement.
Right. Like imagine being wrongly accused because the system made a mistake.
It really highlights how technology isn't neutral. It reflects the biases of its creators.
And the data it learns from.
Right. So what can we do about it?
Good question. What can we do to reduce that bias?
Well, one important step is making sure the data sets are diverse and represent everyone.
So the training data needs to look like the real world.
Exactly. And there's a big push for more transparency in AI.
What does that mean?
Basically being able to understand how these algorithms make decisions so we can spot and fix any biases.
Makes sense. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of work to do.
There is. And it's a conversation everyone needs to be part of. The developers, the policymakers, ethicists.
And the people who use it.
Exactly. But it's also important to remember that this technology can do a lot of good.
That's true. We've focused on the downsides, but there are positives too.
For sure.
I mean, facial recognition can help find missing people.
It can
Prevent identity theft.
Yes.
Even help with medical diagnoses.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how much potential it has.
Yeah.
What really stands out to you as the benefit of this technology?
Think about that for a second. It's a good question to consider.
It is. It really makes you wonder what's next for facial recognition.
It does. What do you think is on the horizon?
We've come so far since those early days of FACEIT. What advancements do you think we'll see in the next few years?
Well, one area that's really taking off is emotion recognition technology.
Emotion recognition. Wow, what's that?
Imagine systems that can not only identify you, but also analyze your facial expressions to figure out how you're feeling.
You mean like if I'm happy or sad?
Exactly.
That sounds like something out of a movie. What could we even use that for?
Well, on the one hand, it could be helpful in healthcare.
Okay, how so?
Like, imagine helping diagnose things like depression or anxiety.
That's a good point.
But on the other hand, it could also be misused.
Oh, yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Like, imagine advertisers targeting you based on your mood.
Or employers using it to screen job applicants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as the technology keeps getting better, those ethical questions become even more important.
They do. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about where facial recognition started,
Yeah.
how it's changed, and the ethical challenges it brings up.
Right.
But before we finish up, I want to look ahead.
Okay.
William L. Weaver's article showed us where the tech was back in 2001.
Right.
But now I want you to imagine the future.
Okay.
What do you think the role of facial recognition will be in our lives 10 or 20 years from now?
It's a big question.
It is. What are you hoping for? And what are you worried about?
Take a moment to really think about it because your perspective matters.
It does.
As this technology keeps developing, it's important for all of us to be part of the conversation.
Well said. We'll be back in a moment to wrap up our deep dive into the world of facial recognition. Welcome back to the deep dive.
It's kind of amazing to think that facial recognition tech has gone from like a sci-fi idea to something we see almost every day in just a few decades.
It really is. And like we've been talking about, it brings up some big questions.
Yeah.
About privacy, security, even what it means to have an identity when our faces are basically becoming data points.
Right. Before the break, we asked you to imagine what facial recognition might look like in our lives 10 or 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Did you picture like a world where our faces unlock doors, pay for things, even personalize our online experience?
It is fascinating to think about.
It is. Or did you think about a world with constant surveillance, eroding our privacy, and maybe even leading to discrimination?
Yeah, it really makes you think about the possibilities, both good and bad.
Definitely. I think it's safe to say facial recognition is here to stay.
I think so too.
So the question is, how do we make sure it's used responsibly and ethically?
That's the million-dollar question. It is. We've talked about some of the downsides.
Yeah.
You know, the risks to privacy and the potential for bias.
Right.
But what about the good stuff? What about the benefits? I mean, William L. Weaver, writing back in 2001, probably couldn't have imagined how many digital images we have in our lives now.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
We're constantly taking pictures and videos, sharing them instantly all over the world.
It's true.
So in this world, could facial recognition actually be used for good?
I think it definitely could. Imagine if we could use it to find missing children faster and reunite them with their families.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
Or think about medical diagnoses.
Uh-huh.
What if doctors could use facial analysis to catch diseases early on?
Those are some really great examples.
It shows that the technology itself isn't the problem.
Right.
It's how we choose to use it.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations now.
While it's still being developed.
Exactly. We need to think about the potential consequences, both good and bad, and make sure we're using it ethically. One thing I keep coming back to is this idea of balance. How do we balance security and privacy? Innovation and responsibility?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's like walking a tightrope.
It is. And we're all trying to figure out the best way forward.
We are. And it sounds like we all have a role to play.
We do. Developers need to build ethical technology. Policymakers need to create smart regulations.
And everyone needs to be informed and engaged.
Exactly. It all goes back to what William L. Weaver wrote back in 2001.
About character.
Yeah, he said character is what you do when nobody's looking. Well, now, in a world where our faces are always being watched and analyzed, how we choose to use this technology really is a test of our character.
That's a powerful thought and a great note to end on.
It is.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us on this deep dive into facial recognition.
We hope you learned something new.
We covered a lot, from its history to where it is now, and even what the future might hold.
It's a fascinating topic that's constantly evolving.
It is. And remember, the future isn't set in stone. We all have a part in shaping it.
So keep asking those tough questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Until next time.